Hi, honey. How was Debbie's checkup? The dentist was really pleased. Only 6 extractions this time. Great. Plus, she needs a jawbone graft and 12 implants. Must be that new gel toothpaste we've been using. Yes, patented new Chopper Sheen. Removes unwanted pulp, enamel, and bone. Chopper Sheen, now in refreshing mint. Here's a piece of graffiti I saw scrawled in black marking pen on one of those newspaper dispensers you see on New York sidewalks. It said, "Rosie O'Donnell sleeps with her head between a woman's legs." I couldn't help wondering who had written it, and under what circumstances. I wondered, had someone simply awakened that morning and decided the time had come to share this little tidbit he'd been thinking about for a long time? And had he gone out that day determined to find a good place to write it, and this seemed like the best spot? Was it that simple? Or was the person just out walking around and had this sudden burst of inspiration, something he didn't want to forget, but he didn't have a piece of paper handy? And why didn't he take the newspaper dispenser home with him to refer to it later? And I also wondered, if that was it, what kind of person was walking around with one of those thick felt-tip marking pens in his pocket in the first place? This wasn't no Sharpie, folks. This was one of those serious, thick, chisel-tip pens that get you high if you leave it open too long. It's thoughts of this sort that seriously limit the size of my circle of friends. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your announcer, Dandaleo Prell. Join us now as we play America's favorite game, Answer This, You Prick! The show where folks just like you, although perhaps less attractive, have a chance to win fabulous prizes. And now, here's America's favorite prick, Anthony Boff. Hi, folks. I'm your genial host, Anthony Boff. Our jackpot today is $111 plus a trip up north. Let's meet our first 2 contestants, Clark Fark and Dolly Drellman. What do you do, Clark? I pretty much just sit around, Anthony. Swell. What about you, Dolly? No sitting around for me, Mr. Boff. I stand near the window. All day? Except for meals, unless I'm fasting. Well, you sound like interesting people. Let's get right to our game. Just before airtime, a short backstage shoving match determined that Clark would get the first question. So here it is. Are you ready, Clark? Ready as a bastard, Mr. Boff. Okay. Remember, the category is people. Now then, Clark Fark, as America watches, please answer this, you prick. Damon and Sylvia Prongster live in Thighmaster, Maine, on the corner of Watkins and Skirmerhorn. Last Tuesday at 6 in the evening, a brown Chevrolet drove past their house. What was the name of the last mechanic to change the oil on that car, and what was the name of his grandfather's first-grade teacher? You have 3 seconds. Jason Warburton and Mrs. Amelia Day Higgins. Oh, I'm awfully sorry, Clark. Your answer is incorrect. The correct answer is Dudley Manouche and Clara Wheatley. Well, I just took a wild guess. I knew that answer. Not fucking likely, Dolly. I agree, Mr. Boff. I think she's full of shit. Clark, I'm awfully sorry you did such a poor job. I see your family in our audience, and they look ashamed. But you do win a roll of quarters and the home version of teacher-approved Answer This, You Prick. Play it with your kids, and we'll add $1 to our jackpot, bringing the total to $112. It's too late for us to get to Dolly Drellman, but that's just too bad for her. Don't forget to join us again in June or May to play Answer This, You Prick, when one of our main questions will be, who was the first person to strangle someone he had known for more than 6 years? Good night, everybody! Guests on Answer This, You Prick receive a framed picture of Henry Kissinger and stay at the luxurious Hotel for the Malformed in downtown Watsonville. Watsonville, the last place you want to be. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Yesterday I killed my 3rd priest in a month. The first time it scared me. The second time I had no feelings at all. The 3rd time I actually began to like it. I'm not really a priest, son. I'm just cleaning the confessional. This is called Thanksgiving in the Kitchen. You look great in that dress, Marion. Really sexy. I was thinking if God forbid something ever happened to Joe and Estelle, I'd sure like to spend some time with you.
I feel the same way about you, Bart.
Really? Look, maybe we wouldn't have to wait for something to happen to Joe and Estelle. What do you think? This one is called Walk, Don't Walk.
I heard Phil Hanley died. What happened?
It's the strangest thing. He was walking down Fifth Avenue on his way to Times Square. He took a right at 42nd Street and headed over to Broadway. He was just strolling along, minding his own business, when suddenly a big chunk of concrete fell on him and crushed him to death.
Jesus, what a way to go.
I know. I would have taken a right at 50th Street, gone over to Broadway, and then headed down to Times Square. Uncle Lochinvar, although a moral vegetarian who only ate meat if the animal had died in its sleep, once punched out his twin daughters because they wouldn't lend him 15 cents. He could speak 7 languages, but unfortunately he was disliked in all those countries. His hobby was visiting cemeteries in poor areas and guessing which people had had the worst lives. He fell in love with a fish dentist named Chiquita, and a week later she died from using infected toilet paper while watching a TV show called Progress in Medicine. Inconsolable, Lochinvar, after composing his own epitaph, "Believe me, I wasn't a schmuck," died as part of a group enema suicide pact. Uncle Sherlock was a proctologist's mate in the Navy who fought in Korea and the Philippines. Unfortunately, it was just last year, and he was jailed in both countries. He was the only man ever brought before the World Court for unpaid parking tickets. His personal checks did not depict nature scenes. They showed animal euthanasia and the Allied firebombing of Dresden. During a bungee jump, he fell in love with a Dutch courtroom artist, and they were married in a windmill the next day during a relative calm. They drifted apart when he realized that all she wanted to do was sit for hours and listen to skiing on the radio. Later, he moved to Milan and was killed when a riot broke out at the La Scala candy counter during the second act of Rigoletto. Uncle Dagwood was a fun guy. He once claimed the most difficult thing he ever did was to take a shit in a phone booth without removing his overcoat. He met his wife, Spatula, at a UFO convention where she was conducting a basketball clinic for abductees. The instant they met, Dagwood knew she was his kind of woman. She had peach preserves in her hair and brown gravy caked on her neck. Spatula worked for years as an unregistered nurse and eventually ran off with an ironmonger. She and her new lover, Rolf, died in a blimp fire over Newfoundland, and Dagwood was killed in a Barcalounger having rough sex with a Norwegian fisherman. Uncle Lucifer was my most interesting uncle. He was an elk hunter, but he wouldn't kill the elk. Instead, he would chase it down, knock it to the ground, and suck all the gristle out of its neck through a Donald Duck straw. He was fun to be with. He could eat a whole bowl of alphabet soup and then vomit up the vowels and consonants separately. His hobby was attending reunions of groups he never belonged to and pretending to be people who were long dead. Till the end of his days, Lucifer remained bitter that when he was a boy, there had been no seedless red grapes. He died in an Indiana furniture outlet when he was torn to pieces by a pack of Cape hunting dogs. Child care tip. Never use a hammer to smooth out the lumps on a newborn baby's head. Instead, wrap a soft, clean cloth around a 10-inch length of wood and pound each lump repeatedly until the larger ones are gone and the area is smooth. Follow up by rubbing vigorously with a wire brush. Remember, never use a hammer on a child of any age, especially an infant. A news report. The death of Humpty Dumpty. From the nursery newsroom, this is Keith Blanchgetter. A mystery on the West Side today with the apparent death of the beloved Humpty Dumpty. We begin our Action Central News Team coverage tonight with Joni Wong at the scene of the tragedy. Thank you, Dan. Well, it's true. Humpty Dumpty is dead. The cause of death was apparently a great fall from this wall behind me. Joni, what's the scene like out there right now? Well, as you can see, police have taped off the area and are treating it as a crime scene, and no one seems to know why. According to one eyewitness, all the king's horses and all the king's men tried to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, but were unable to do so. We have with us now one of those king's men. What is your name, sir?
Dooley, Kevin Dooley.
And you're one of the king's men?
That's right. I've been one of the king's men for 17 years.
And you were the first on the scene?
That is correct. My partner and I responded to a 1043. That's an egg on a wall.
Egg on a wall?
Right. It's a routine call. We get them all the time. Usually by the time we arrive, the egg is gone. Or else we arrive and the egg is intoxicated and we have to remove him.
And what was different this time?
Well, this time we got a dead egg on our hands. He either fell or jumped. There's a chance he was pushed. We can't rule it out.
Is that why you're treating it as a crime scene?
That is correct. Crime scene people are checking the area now for trace evidence, hair and fibers, stuff like that.
We've been told that all the king's horses and all the king's men tried to put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
That's not completely true. Some of the king's horses and a few of the king's men, but not all. The king has a lot of horses and men. They're needed for parades.
So they weren't able to put him back together again?
No, he never had a chance. His yoke was broken. Once the yoke is gone on these eggs, it's all over.
Do the police have any theories?
We're developing leads at this time, questioning some other eggs who were seen with him earlier today. Apparently there was some drinking going on at a picnic. All in all, we're told there were about a dozen eggs out there, and I guess it got pretty rowdy. They were singing dirty songs and harassing females.
Can the public help?
We're asking people who may have information to call our tip hotline, 800-429-EGGS. All calls will be held in strict confidence.
Thank you for talking with us, Officer Dooley. Well, that's it from the scene, Keith. Humpty Dumpty dead at the bottom of a wall. Now let's send it over to Marcia Lopez at the Dumpty family residence. Marcia? Thank you, Joni. I'm standing here with Humpty's best friend, Vinnie Amaletta. Vinnie, what kind of an egg was he?
Easy going, nice guy. One time when some kids were teasing him about being fat, he bought them all an ice cream.
But what do you think happened?
I don't know. I saw him just yesterday. He was fine. I told him to stay off that wall. It's not safe. Some of those bricks are loose. But he was headstrong. He never listened.
Thank you, Vinnie. We're going to talk now with Humpty's widow, Arlene Dumpty. Mrs. Dumpty, thanks for taking a moment with us. This must be a very difficult time for you.
Yes, I'm still in shock. My thoughts are all scrambled.
How did you feel when you found out he was dead?
It was no fun, I can tell you that. He was a good egg.
What do you suppose he was doing on the wall?
He went up there all the time. He would just sit there and think. He was very deep for an egg.
What are your plans for services? Will there be services?
Well, he was very conservative, so we'll probably stick with a traditional egg funeral.
And what is that?
You know, skillet, a little butter, salt and pepper, maybe some peppers and onions.
Will you have an open casket?
I'm not sure. A lot of 'em is already soaked into the ground. But we'll crazy glue the shell together as best we can and go from there.
How can people express their condolences?
We're asking people just to send bacon, or ham if they like, and maybe some home fries, but not too greasy. Or they can just make a contribution to the Humpty Dumpty Foundation for Research on Safer Egg Salad.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Dumpty.
No sweat. My pleasure, honey. I'm sure he's smiling down on us from wherever it is eggs go. Although he was an agnostic. He would have liked that.
Well, that's it. Humpty Dumpty is dead and no one knows why. A story we'll undoubtedly hear more about. From the scene, this is Marcia Lopez. Now back to our studio. Here's a good way to provide some entertainment for your 4-year-old when you tuck him in at night. and at the same time stimulate his imagination. I came up to say good night and tuck you in, Timmy. You had a big day, so make sure you get a good night's sleep. And don't forget to watch out for the boogeyman. Remember what Daddy told you about the boogeyman, how he kills little boys? What do you think, Timmy? Is the boogeyman here in your room, hiding somewhere?
Is he in the closet?
Is he going to jump out and kill you when I leave the room? He might. You never know. Maybe he's under the bed. He likes to hide there, too. He might claw his way through the mattress and kill you. Don't let him kill you, Timmy. You know what he does? He sticks a sharp metal tube up your nose and sucks the fluid out of your brain. It really hurts a lot. I'm going to turn out the lights now and leave you alone in the dark, all by yourself. And I don't want to hear a peep out of you. If I hear any noise coming out of this room, I'm going to come up here and beat you. Try to get a good night's sleep. By the way, Mommy saw a monster walking up and down the hall last night. The monster had a piece of paper in his hand with your name on it. Night-night. Here's a surefire way to stimulate the economy and increase productivity at the same time. From now on, when someone asks what time it is, it costs $1. That would stimulate the economy. Then, if they don't want to pay, they have to go find out for themselves. That would increase productivity. Some of my ideas may not be perfect, but they're always worth considering. The best thing about visiting a hospital is that you see a lot of people who are much sicker than you, and it kind of makes you feel good. True fact. I read that there's a rich couple in the Hamptons on Long Island who have palm trees on their property, and in the winter they fly the trees to Florida to get them out of the cold weather. I can't help wondering how they treat their servants. You know how sometimes you have a song going through your head over and over all day long, maybe even 2 or 3 days, and it's driving you crazy because you can't get it out of your mind? Well, I know how to fix that. It's extreme, but it works every time. You kill yourself. You know, they're always talking about what separates the men from the boys. Well, I'm going to tell you what separates the men from the boys. The sodomy laws. Regarding a wild goose chase, why are these wild geese supposed to be so hard to find? They're right up there in the sky. I see them flying over in big flocks all the time in the spring and the fall. They don't seem to be hiding, so why do we make such a big deal out of this? Live every day as if it's your last, and eventually it will be. You'll be fully prepared. I hope I meet Bob Dole someday. I plan to grab his bad right arm and shake it like crazy. By the way, I'm glad he didn't get to be president. I prefer a guy who can push the nuclear button with either hand. The feminists have this thing, take our daughters to work day. Why don't the men have take our sons to the cat house night? At the beginning of the Iraq War, I saw a red, white, and blue bumper sticker that said, "United we stand." What is that supposed to mean? During the Revolutionary War, it referred to the American colonies. What does it mean now? That we should all think alike and there should be no dissenting opinions? As far as I'm concerned, united we're fucked. O.J. Simpson has already received the ultimate punishment. For the rest of his life, he has to associate with golfers. I don't believe in road rage. I prefer the gentle rebuke. If I don't like the way someone is driving, I pull up alongside the other car and say, "I hope your children turn out poorly." Only one time have I lost my cool. That was the time I said to a woman, "I hope you get a blister on your cunt." But I said it with a smile. True fact. A headline said, "Peacekeeper killed in safe haven." Good. That'll show 'em. I think a lot of gay men stay in the closet because they're interested in fashion.
I wonder if a person who comes out of a coma feels refreshed and well rested. One day it dawned on me that Hitler had a mom and dad. The phrase, Hitler's mom and dad, has an odd ring to it, doesn't it? It's kind of like when CNN used to talk about the city of Tikrit in Iraq being Saddam Hussein's hometown. The two ideas don't seem to go together. You know what's great about being in your 60s? Your children are in their 40s, so you don't have to worry about child molesters anymore. Unless, of course, one of your 40-year-old children is a child molester. I drove past a school with a sign that said, "We're drug-free and gun-free." Later that day, I drove past another school that didn't have a sign like that. What am I supposed to infer from this about the second school?
Reasons for giving up hope. Nothing works, nothing counts, nothing fits, no one cares, no one listens, standards have fallen, everyone's fatter, lines are longer, traffic's worse, kids are dumber, and the air is dirty. I'll be back with more reasons for giving up hope. In the meantime, try to come up with a few of your own.
Here's a thought. If you have a perfectly DNA-matched identical twin, technically it's possible to go fuck yourself. Sometimes you hear people say, "What kind of a message does that send to our children?" And I think, what messages are these people talking about? When I was a kid, I never got any messages. Maybe an aunt would send me a birthday card or something, or once in a while my mother would get a Western Union telegram. But at our house, that was about it.
Good news for senior citizens. Death is near.
During one of those patriotic orgies of self-congratulation that followed the First Gulf War, as General Schwarzkopf was bragging about dropping fire on women and babies, a protester interrupted his speech. The man who had killed a few 100,000 civilians continued to speak. The protester was charged with disturbing the peace.
In New York State, there's a town called Eastchester. It's in a county called Westchester.
I think we need some new Christmas carols with a more modern approach. Of course, I wouldn't abandon the religious theme completely. How about, "Holy Christ, the Christmas tree's on fire"? Or, "Jesus, can you believe it's Christmas again?" This ought to get the ball rolling. I'm hoping you people will take it from here.
True fact. In 2002, in the U.S. Supreme Court, the surviving heirs of the famous film comedy trio were awarded the intellectual rights to the Three Stooges.
I don't know about you, but years ago, when Evel Knievel was jumping across the Snake River on his motorcycle, I was rooting for the river. In the news from Israel, I keep hearing about the cycle of violence. It reminded me that when I was a kid, I had one of them too. After school, I used to peddle it around the neighborhood, hitting other kids over the head with a big steel pipe.
They always say the vice president is just a heartbeat away from the presidency.
Don't they mean the lack of a heartbeat?
I always feel good when I visit a sickroom supply store and see all the things I don't need. The last thing a young girl needs is a hands-on father.
I really feel good. I wish I felt even more like this.
Dear Mom, how are you?
I am fine. I tried to donate my liver to science, but they wouldn't take it. Next time I'm going to add some sautéed onions and a light sauce. I'll let you know how it goes. Love, Neil.
An anonymous quote. There's nothing wrong with a man who enjoys a good blowjob.
I read an article that cautioned people against shaken baby syndrome. Do people really need to be told this sort of thing? And if some people do need to be told, are these the kind of people who are very likely to heed the advice? Personally, I never shake a baby, unless the recipe calls for it.
Imagine how creepy it would be to be sexually abused by your great-great-grandparents. Ugh.
Do you know why it is that when a rancher fucks a sheep, he does it at the edge of a cliff? It's so the sheep will push back. True fact. A guy somewhere in the Midwest was sued for having too many Christmas lights on his house. Happy holidays. I think Western Union should have a service where women with big tits come to your house and sing happy birthday. They could call it a mammogram. Whenever I hear about someone who died for the flag, I always wonder about his real motives. And then I remember, oh yeah, they shoot deserters. A lot of the people who worry about the safety of nuclear plants don't bother using their seat belts. Here's some fun. Just keep calling telephone numbers at random and yelling, "Get off the line!"
This is National Disabled Month. Do your part. Cripple someone today. 2 soldiers get into a fight. 2 other soldiers pull them apart and tell them not to fight. Then they all pick up their guns and go kill people.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
The chicken.
What about the egg?
Oh, okay. The egg.
Using technology to clean up the mess made by technology doesn't seem too intelligent. At one time, if you made a telephone call from your table in a restaurant, it would have been a novelty and it would have attracted a lot of attention, more than the food. Now, if you're using a telephone at your table in a restaurant, it's considered a nuisance. Why don't they just let these gay Boy Scouts join the Girl Scouts? What the fuck? You've got 2 groups. Use them both.
There's a whole different now.
When you drive into California from Las Vegas, they have an agricultural inspection station where they ask you if you have any fruits or vegetables with you. And then they just believe whatever you tell them. What's the point of that? You know what I do? On every trip, I put a yam in the glove compartment just to be sure I'm breaking the law. We ought to have a name for the day before yesterday. Day for day? Yesterfor day. Why don't you people just come up with something and get back to me?
I don't own any stocks or bonds. All my money is tied up in debt. A good motto to live by. Always try not to get killed. If Marilyn Monroe were alive today, she'd be in her late 70s, and I'll bet there would still be guys lining up for a chance to fuck her. Why not join the army? Join up and die. How do you expect to keep America free if you won't die? I'm dead. I died in Vietnam. I'm dead, and all my old army buddies are dead. Can you say that? No. What's wrong with you? Perhaps you've noticed we no longer have old people in this country. They're all gone now, replaced by senior citizens. Somehow we wound up with millions of these unfortunate creatures known as golden agers or mature adults. These are cold, lifeless, antiseptic terms, typically American, all ways of sidestepping the fear of aging. And it's not difficult to understand the fear of aging. It's natural and it's universal. No one wants to get old. No one wants to die. But we do. We die. And we don't like that. So we shade the truth. I started doing it when I reached my 40s. I'd look in the mirror at that time and think, well, I guess I'm getting older. That sounded a little better than old. Sounded like it might even last a bit longer. But people forget that older is comparative, and they use it as an absolute. She's an older woman. Oh, really? Older than what? Than she used to be? Well, yeah. So? People think getting old is bad because they think being old is bad. But you know something? Being old is just fine. In fact, it can be terrific. And anyway, it's one of those things you don't get to choose. It's not optional. But that insufferable group among us known as baby boomers, ages 42 through 59 as of 2005, are beginning to get old, and they're having trouble dealing with that.
Remember, these baby boomers are the ones who gave us this soft, politically correct language in the first place. So rather than admit they're getting old, the baby boomers have come up with a new term to describe themselves as they approach the grave. They don't care for middle-aged, so instead, get this, folks, instead they claim to be pre-elderly. Don't you love that? Pre-elderly. It's a real word. You don't hear it a lot, but it's out there. The boomers claim that if you're between 50 and 65, you're pre-elderly. But I'd be willing to bet that in 2011, when they begin turning 65, they will not be calling themselves elderly. I have a hunch they'll come up with some new way of avoiding reality. And I have a suggestion for them. They should call themselves the pre-dead. It's a perfect term because for them, it's accurate and it's highly descriptive. By the way, those ever-clever boomers have also come up with a word to describe the jobs they feel are most suitable for retired people who wish to keep working. They call these jobs elder-friendly. Isn't that sad? God, that's just really, really sad. And so, to sum it up, we have these senior citizens. And whether I like that phrase or not, unfortunately, I got used to it, and I no longer react too violently when I hear it. But there is still one description for old people that I'll never accept. That's when I hear someone describe an old guy as being, for instance, 80 years young. Even though I know it's tongue-in-cheek, it makes my skin crawl. It's overly cute and precious, and it's an evasion. It's junk language. On CBS's 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl, God help her, actually referred to some old man as being a 90-something. Please, Leslie, I need a small personal break here. One last pathetic example in this category. On the radio, I heard Matt Drudge actually refer to people of age. And he wasn't being sarcastic. He said the West Nile virus is a particular threat to people of age. Poor Matt. Apparently he's more fucked up than he seems. Now, going to an adjacent subject, one unfortunate fact of life for many of these 80 or 90-somethings is that they're forced to live in places where they'd rather not be. Old people's homes. So what name should we use for these places where we hide our old people? When I was a little boy, there was a building in my neighborhood called the Home for the Aged. It had a copper sign on the gate. Home for the Aged. It always looked deserted. I never saw anyone go in. Naturally, I never saw anyone come out either. Later, I noticed people started calling those places nursing homes and rest homes. Apparently, it was decided that some of these old people needed nurses, while others just needed a little rest. What you hear them called now is retirement homes or long-term care facilities. There's another one of those truly bloodless terms, long-term care facility. But actually, it makes sense to give it a name like that, because if you do, you make it a lot easier for the person you're putting in there to acquiesce and cooperate with you. I remember old people used to tell their families, "Whatever you do, don't put me in a home. Please, don't put me in a home." But it's hard to imagine one of them saying, "Whatever you do, don't put me in a long-term care facility." So calling it that is really a trick. Come on, Grandpa, it's not a home. It's a long-term care facility. By the way, while we're on this subject of the language of getting old, I want to tell you something that happened to me in New York on a recent evening. I was standing in line at the Carnegie Deli to pay my check, and there was a guy ahead of me who looked like he was in his 60s. He gave the cashier a $10 bill, but apparently it wasn't enough. When the cashier mentioned it to him in a nice way, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I guess I had a senior moment." And I thought how sad that was, to blame a simple mistake on the fact that you're in your 60s, even if you're just sort of joking. As if anyone would think a 20-year-old couldn't make the same mistake. I only mention this because it's an example of how people can brainwash themselves by adopting popular language. I wanted to pull him aside and say, "Listen, I just heard you refer to yourself as a senior, and I wanted to ask, Were you by any chance a junior last year? Because if you weren't a junior last year, then you're not a senior this year. I wanted to say it, but I figured, why would he listen to me? After all, I'm still a freshman.
Here's a safety tip from the American Eye Association. Never jab a knitting needle directly into your eye and repeatedly thrust it in and out. You could be inviting vision problems. If you should suffer an eye injury, rinse the eye immediately with a caustic solution of Clorox and ammonia, and rub the surface of the eye vigorously for about 10 minutes with No. 3 sandpaper. The American Eye Association reminds you, don't fuck around with your eyes. They're the key to vision.
Do you ever get lip crud? That sticky film that sometimes forms on your lip, especially the lower lip? It's kind of a gooey crud that builds up, and when it dries, it turns into a gummy, crusty coating. Thicker at the corners of the mouth, but thinning out as it works its way down toward the center of the lip. And when it's really bad, the corners of your mouth look like parentheses. Do you ever get that? Lip crud? Well, here's how you get rid of it. It's a simple, low-tech operation, and it requires just a single tool, the thumbnail. That's all you need. You scrape the crud off with your thumbnail. You just scrape it on down, and you keep on scraping. Don't worry about those people watching from the bus stop. If they knew anything, they wouldn't be riding the bus. You scrape it on down, you scrape it on down, and finally, when it's all off, you take it and roll it up into a little ball, and then you save that son of a bitch. That's my practice, folks. I save it. Personally, I'm a lip crud buff. In fact, I save everything I remove from my body. Don't you? At least for a little while. Don't you look at things when they first come off of you? Study them? Aren't you curious? Don't you spend a few minutes looking at something, trying to figure out what it is and what it's doing on you in the first place? Sure you do. You don't just pull some growth off your neck and throw it in the trash. You study it. You want to know what it is. Besides, you never know when you're going to need parts. Isn't that true? You ever see these guys on TV? They're in the hospital. One guy's waiting for a kidney, another guy's waiting for a lung. Fuck that shit. I've got parts at home. I have a freezer full of viable organs, 2 of everything, ready to go. What do you need, a spleen? An esophagus? How about a nice used ball bag, huh? Come on, Caucasian ball bag, 1 owner, good condition. He only scratched it on Sundays. Come on, folks, take a chance. I've got everything you need. But regardless of your need for parts, the larger point is true. Most people study the things they pick off their bodies before they throw them away. Because you want to know what something is. You don't want to spend 15 minutes peeling a malignant tumor off your forehead just to toss it out the window sight unseen into the neighbor's swimming pool. No! You want to take a good long look at it. You may even want to share the experience. Holy shit, honey, look at this thing. Holy jumping fucking Jesus. Look at this. Hey, honey, come in here. Honey, come in here, goddammit. Fuck the rice-a-roni. Get your ass in here. Look at this thing. Ain't it something? Guess where I got it? A minute ago, it was part of my head. Not anymore. I pried the bastard off with paint thinner and a Phillips head screwdriver. But look at it, honey. Look at the colors. It's green, blue, yellow, orange, brown, tan, khaki, beige, bronze, olive, neutral, black, off-black, champagne gold, Navajo white, turquoise, and Band-Aid color. Plus, get this, it's exactly the same shape as Iraq. That is, if you leave out that northern section where the Kurds live. I'm not throwing this bastard away. It might become a collectible. Dial up those dickheads on eBay. We can make some fucking money on this thing. It annoys me when people complain about athletes taking steroids to improve athletic performance. It's a phony argument because over the years, every single piece of sports equipment used by athletes has been improved many times over. Golf balls and clubs, tennis balls, rackets, baseball gloves and bats, football pads and helmets, and so on through every sport. Each time technology has found a way to improve equipment, it has done so. So why shouldn't a person treat his body the same way? In the context of sports, the body is nothing more than one more piece of equipment anyway, so why not improve it with new technology? Athletes use weights. Why shouldn't they use chemicals? Consider the Greek Phidippides, a professional runner who in 490 BC ran from Athens to Sparta and back, 280 miles, to ask the Spartans for help against the Persians in an impending battle that threatened Athens. Don't you think his generals would have been happy to give him amphetamines if they had been available, and a nice pair of New Balance high-performance running shoes while they were at it? Grow up, purists. The body is not a sacred vessel. It's a tool. I don't care for athletes who point to the sky after they've accomplished something on the field. Even worse are the ones who kneel down, bow their heads, and make a big show of being believers. You know something? God doesn't like that shit. He's not impressed with spiritual grandstanding. It embarrasses him. He says, "Get up, you phony show-off bullshit artist, and pay attention to the fucking game. I took the points." Imagine the conceit of these people who think God is helping them and is looking for their acknowledgement. I say, play now, pray later. Attitude check. Let's straighten out this whole attitude thing. Someone on TV said the sports anchor guys on ESPN have a lot of attitude. Let me tell you something. What these guys have is not attitude. Here's attitude. One day when I was about 18, I was standing at the bar in the Moylan Tavern with a couple of guys from my New York neighborhood. The Moylan had big windows, so if you were standing by the bar, you could easily see the people walking by on Broadway. One of the guys in our group was a little older than the rest of us, an ex-convict named John Cooney. All of a sudden, in the middle of the conversation, he looked out the window and saw someone walking past. He reached behind the bar for the baseball bat, the one the bartenders used for settling sports and political arguments, and he went outside, walked up to the guy on the sidewalk, and just started smashing him with the baseball bat. The guy fell down. John walked back into the bar and put the bat away. He said, "The guy owes me money." That's attitude. The guys on ESPN don't have that. What they have is a kind of smart-mouth white boy college mentality. They're snotty, superficial white guys. Even the black anchors on ESPN are nothing more than snotty white guys. Snotty is not attitude. Snotty is just bad manners, and it's boring. John Cooney knew attitude. He also knew more about how to swing a bat than any of those blow-dried, never-were athletes sitting safely behind their fruity little desks. 25 years ago, two lovely girls in San Carlos, California, were kind enough to perform this following football cheer for me. And in 1984, I used it on an HBO show. I'm passing it along now and would like to point out that it's actually quite useful at sporting events of any kind. In fact, I've found it to be a big crowd pleaser at weddings, baptisms, and first communions as well. Here it is. Chant this in good health. Rat shit, bat shit, dirty old twat. 69 assholes tied in a knot. Hooray! Lizard shit, fuck! Let's go over that again, this time with a few comments. Rat shit, bat shit. How nice to begin with a reference to nature. Dirty old twat. A perfectly normal sports reference as far as I'm concerned. 69 assholes tied in a knot. No, I don't know what that means either. Hooray! There's the cheer part. Lizard shit. Back to nature once again. Fuck! And we end on an uplifting note. Now, here's the happy postscript. About 10 years later, I met a guy named Michael who gave me the second verse to the cheer. I hope those San Carlos girls will hear this and accept it as my way of saying thanks. Eat, bite, fuck, suck, nibble, gobble, chew. Finger fuck, hair pie, dick, cunt, screw. Hooray! Bat fuck, blow me. Let's go over that again. Eat, bite, fuck, suck. Once again, off to an excellent start. Nibble, gobble, chew. I notice verbs are more prominent this time. Finger fuck, hair pie, dick, cunt, screw. More good sports references. Hooray! Can't have a cheer without it. Bat fuck! Truly an interesting thought. Blow me! Once again, ending on an uplifting note. Cheers! Never buy two different garments of the same type at the same time, such as two sports shirts. Inevitably, you will like one better than the other, and you will choose to wear it every time. The second one will always remain second choice, and it will stay in the closet, coming out only occasionally when you hold it in front of you at arm's length and decide not to wear it. Here's how you handle this problem. Exercise a little discipline at the store and buy just one shirt. Then, if you like it, wait a month and buy another. That's it. Next, I'm going to work on nuclear proliferation. Another area of speech that could benefit from a bit more realism would be those announcements that are made just before a boxing match.
Ladies and gentlemen, the main event of the evening, 12 rounds of heavyweight boxing. In this corner from Cornhole, Mississippi, weighing 200 pounds and wearing soiled white trunks, an utter and complete loser who is wanted in 6 states for crimes against the animal kingdom. Considered a complete scumbag by his family, he once fucked his sister at a church picnic and forced her to walk home alone. Also, on at least 4 occasions, he has taken out his dick at the circus and waved it at the trapeze lady. Here is Henry Gonzalez. In the other corner, wearing a pair of lame, out-of-style zebra-skin shorts that he found on the street, from Sweatband, Arkansas, an unattractive and disturbed young man who by court order is not permitted to be alone for more than 2 minutes at a time. In and out of 16 mental institutions over the years, he is a dangerous sociopath who once killed a nun for blocking his view. He has been legally barred from more than 1,500 bars in the New York City area alone, and recently, while visiting a supermarket, he forced a fat woman to blow him in the meat section. Here is Matty Murphy. The fighters move out to the center of the ring to have the boxing rules recited to them.
All right, boys, you know the rules. No biting, scratching, clawing, or tripping. No yanking dicks. No grabbing the other guy's testicles and snapping them up and down. No using a small screwdriver to punch holes in the other guy's neck during clinches. And if you're going to call the other guy's mother a diseased $2 whore, please, in the interest of accuracy, use her full name.
When taking leave of one another, we often say, "Be well." Perhaps we should be more precise and a bit more practical. Reasonably, we can't expect everyone to be healthy all the time. Good wishes should be more realistic. I hope you remain reasonably healthy during the next 18 months or so, and if you have a stroke, I hope it only paralyzes you on one side, leaving you free to take phone calls. I think people would appreciate such thoughtfulness and precision. We Americans love our prepositional phrases. Out of sight, off the charts, in the groove, on the ball, up the creek, down the tubes, in the dumper, out the yin-yang, off the wall, round the bend, below the belt, under the weather, and of course, under the table. But rather than under the table, let us begin on the table. That's a phrase you hear a lot in the news, especially from Washington. In negotiations of any kind, certain things are said to be on the table, implying, of course, that other things are off the table. And sometimes, regardless of what's on the table, a settlement is reached under the table. The table seems important. If a person is highly qualified, we say he brings a lot to the table. Unfortunately, those who bring a lot to the table often have too much on their plates. Still, they're guaranteed a seat at the table because they think outside the box, which puts them ahead of the curve. Now, if the negotiators agree on what's on the table, then they're on the same page. Personally, I don't like people on my page. If someone says to me, "We're on the same page," I say, "Do me a favor, please, turn the page. I'd rather not be on that page. In fact, I'd rather be in a completely different book." But that's beside the point. I've wandered off the track. Returning to negotiations, if the sides are getting close, we're told they're in the ballpark. This often comes from people in the know, speaking off the record. And in Washington, many in the know are also in the loop, because after all, they work inside the Beltway. Now, there are other government people outside the Beltway who nonetheless remain in the know and in the loop. They function in foreign countries, and we say they're on the ground. If they're CIA, they're under the radar and paid off the books. Much of what they learn is picked up on the street. But they don't always need to be on the street, because a lot of information comes in over the transom. Putting aside government for the moment, I wonder if you're aware that a completely different group of people has recently emerged in America. They're not on the ground, and they're not on the street. You know where they are? They're in the house. Apparently, they never went out. And there must be a lot of them, because you hear it all the time. He's in the house. And if I may broach a delicate subject here, some of these people who are in the house are also in the closet. Fortunately for them, if they somehow manage to get out of the closet, they'll still be in the house. That is, they will be until they've left the building. How often these days we hear that someone has left the building? And I'm sure you've noticed it's mostly show business people who leave buildings. The accepted belief being that Elvis was the first to master this maneuver, although you can also find Beatles fans who will argue that the Fab Four were known to have left several buildings as well, thereby accomplishing what would have been the first multi-star building departures. Unfortunately, at the time, no one realized the significance of what the Beatles were doing. Now, there are no doubt those among you who are seething, because has left the building is not a prepositional phrase. I grant that, but you'd have to agree that nonetheless it fits here very nicely. Because after all, only people who are in the house can leave the building. But alas, it's impossible to leave the building if you're still in the closet. In fact, you can't even get to the front door. However, let's say everything breaks your way and somehow you manage to leave the building. Guess where you'll be? Right, back on the street with the CIA. So you better be on your toes, because the CIA will get on your case and they'll be in your face. Who knows, they might even go upside your head. I'm sorry, folks. This is really getting off the wall, so let's return to where this whole thing began, under the table, where those shady deals are made. And isn't it interesting that under the table is similar to under the counter, where illegal products are sold? Under the counter, as opposed, of course, to over the counter, which describes a drug that does not require a prescription. But when you think about it, even drugs that require a prescription are sold over the counter. I mean, the pharmacist doesn't somehow give them to you underneath the counter. You don't get them by going around behind the counter. What happens is you stand at the counter, pay the man, and he hands them to you across the counter. Or he sets them down on the counter, and you pick them up off the counter. Or if you want, you can completely eliminate the counter by having the drugs delivered to your home. Provided, of course, that at the time you're in the house. Well, folks, it turns out that one of the phrases I used at the beginning of this piece was more appropriate than I suspected at the time. It's clear to me now that in the dumper is exactly where this piece has wound up. So that's it. I'm out the door. Here are some interesting sex facts from Thailand, accurate as of 15 years ago. And I apologize for the dated quality of this information, but I find it fascinating, and since it's accurate, I wish to include it here. In 1990 alone, 5 million sex tourists, mostly affluent men from Japan, spent $4.5 billion on sex in Thailand. The country at that time had 800,000 child prostitutes under the age of 16, prostitution being the major occupation for children between 10 and 16. The girls earn 20 to 80 cents a week, and their recruitment begins at 6 years of age. Additionally, at that time, there were 200,000 Thai prostitutes working in Europe. In 1993, there were 600,000 Thais infected with AIDS, with 1,200 new cases occurring every day. I have only one question to ask. Doesn't anyone in Asia jerk off anymore? By the way, I can't get newer statistics because apparently everyone in Thailand is too busy getting undressed.
Putting the cat out. It was nearly 11:30 and I had just put the cat out. But it hadn't been easy. He had burned more fiercely than I anticipated. The poor thing had caught fire earlier in the evening when, in an effort to test his reflexes, I had thrown his favorite toy mouse into the fireplace, and instinctively he raced in after it. Whoom, you might say. At first I let him burn a while, just to teach him a lesson, and to peel off a couple of layers of the mud, mange, and matted hair which seemed lately, sadly, to have robbed him of a step or two. But I must admit I was also quite fascinated by the many spectacular colors he began to glow with. Colors, no doubt, owed in part to the countless hours he spent killing time in the toxic dump next door. It was quite a show. In fact, I saw several pyrotechnic effects I dare say have not been witnessed since the Grucci home exploded during the bicentennial. Then, as the feline conflagration began to burn itself out, and I could see the clear, stark outline of his hairless body, he began to emit a dense cloud of smoke, along with some other gaseous substance, which I can only describe as cat steam. Acting quickly, I covered him with several cheap sweaters that no longer fit, and pounded him gently, although not without anger, for just over an hour, or until the smoke died down and he stopped his by then bothersome screeching. At that point, energized, apparently by a sudden burst of pain and fear, he leapt several feet into the air, went stiff and spread-eagled, and began to spin violently, giving off an ominous low-frequency hum, and circling the ceiling fan in an elliptical orbit. He circled for the better part of an hour, and then finally, exhausted, or I thought maybe dead, he went suddenly limp. His orbit decayed, and he smashed into an 18th-century brake front, landing heavily on the floor. For 3 days he lay motionless. When finally he awoke, I opened a can of bits of kidney and fed him by hand. I can tell you this, although he looked quite unusual and he smelled god-awful, I was glad I could be there for him when he needed me. Saving the little things we remove from our bodies comes from our natural curiosity. We all have it. We're curious about ourselves, we're curious about our bodies, so we're curious about all the little parts that we clip, snip, pluck, pull, or pick off of ourselves. Toenail clippings are a good example. I'll set the scene for you. You're sitting on the bed at home one night, and something really shitty comes on TV, like a regularly scheduled primetime network program. And you think, well, I'm not going to watch Raymond Blows the Milkman. I'm going to clip my fucking toenails. So you start to clip your toenails, and every time you clip one of them, the little clipped part flies several feet away. You notice that? These little things fly all over the bed. So when you're finished clipping, you have to gather them all back into a little pile. You can't leave them all over the bed. They make little dents in your legs. You don't need that. You have to gather them back into a pile. And do you ever notice this? The bigger the pile gets, the more pride you have in the pile. Look at this, honey, the biggest pile of toenail clippings we've had in this house since the day the Big Bopper died. Get the fucking camcorder, call the Museum of Natural History, tell them we have a good idea for one of those diorama things. And then you search the bed for the largest clipping of all, the biggest one you can find, usually from the big toe. And you bend it for a while, don't you? Yes, you do. You bend it, you squeeze it, you play with it. You have to. Why? Because you can. Because it's still lively and viable. It just came off of your body. There's still moisture in it. It's almost alive. And sometimes I save my toenail clippings overnight. Do you ever do that? You put it in an ashtray and try to save them till the morning? It's no use. They're no good in the morning. They're too dry. You can't bend them. I say fuck them. Throw them away. Who needs unbendable toenails? Not me. I'm not that sick. I don't need parts that badly. No, sir. Little things, folks. Little things you pick off your body and your curiosity about them, especially if it's something you can't really see before you pick it off. For instance, you know how sometimes you're picking your ass?
You know what I mean, just standing out in the driveway, idly picking your ass. And as you're picking and probing, you come across something that seems to be a small object. And let's be real here, folks. After you manage to pull it free, don't you smell it? Just a little bit? Sure you do. You have to. It's only natural. And you get excited. Honey, come here. Look. You want a couple of hits off of this thing while it's still fresh? Remind me something, baby. Did we eat at Fatburger this week? We did. Well, I don't remember ordering anything that smelled like this. I believe this is a shit burger. You know, tastes like a burger, smells like shit. Actually, it smells more like Ethel Merman. Call that Andrew Lloyd Webber fellow. Tell him we have a great idea for one of those fine shows he's always putting on Broadway. Then, give me the scrapbook, baby. This son of a bitch is going right next to that Lithuanian toe jam we found at the Olympics. It's an exciting moment the whole family can enjoy. The birthday party. 2 bachelors at a neighborhood bar. Tomorrow's my 40th birthday. I gotta go get candles and pick up my cake. You buying your own birthday cake?
No, I ain't buying my own birthday cake. My mother's buying it. I'm just picking it up. She's giving me a surprise party, but she don't feel good, so she can't pick up the cake.
It's a surprise party and you're picking up the cake?
I ain't gonna look at it, okay? It's already wrapped. I'm just gonna pick it up.
But how can it be a surprise party if you're picking up the cake and you know the party is coming?
I don't know when it's coming, do I? Could be 8 in the morning, could be midnight.
8 in the morning? How can you have a birthday party at 8 in the morning? Who the fuck is gonna come? The milkman?
Don't laugh. My mother would do it. One year on my birthday, I got drunk and didn't come home. She threw the party without me.
What'd she sing? Happy birthday to him?
You're a fucking riot, you know that?
How many candles you gonna get?
Well, we already got 16 from my kid's birthday last year, and 24 is how many come in a box. I'm 40, so I only gotta get 1 box. I guess I could go ahead and get 2 boxes and leave my kids' candles alone, but 2 boxes would be 48 candles. And what am I gonna do with the 8 extras?
Save 'em?
Don't laugh. At my house, we do save 'em. In fact, we don't even light 'em up.
Why not?
Well, if you light 'em up, they look crappy the next time you want to use 'em. Believe me, we don't waste nothing at my house. In fact, listen to this. A couple of years ago, my grandfather turned 96. 96 is 4 boxes, right? 4 times 24.
Right.
Well, we only had 60 candles on hand, 'cause that's all we ever need for my mother. She's one of them people, when she turned 60, she decided to stop having birthdays. So 60's all we need, 2.5 boxes. So we bought 3 boxes, but that's 72, giving us 12 left over, right?
I'm taking your word for it.
Trust me, okay? So we got 12 extra candles, and we decided to give them to my niece. She was just turning 36, and she already had a brand new box of 24 of her own. She's a widow with no kids, so she don't need too many candles. I think maybe on a cat's birthday or something, she sticks one on a cupcake. So with her, a box lasts a long time.
Keep going.
Anyway, like I say, it's my grandfather's 96th birthday, and we only had 60 candles. That means we need 36 more, a box and a half. So we borrowed 36 from my brother. He had 2 full boxes because in about 6 months it's his 48th birthday. But that's still a ways off, so we borrowed 36 from him, which leaves him with 12. And that works out nice because his kid is going to be 12 next week, so we're covered all the way around.
You got an interesting family.
Anyways, we put the 96 candles on my grandfather's cake and we start to light them up, okay? But there's so many of them that by the time we get to the last one, half of them are just little holes in the frosting with smoke coming out. But if you look down into the holes, you could still see the flames. So my grandfather blew out all 96 candles, but he had to do them one at a time because he had to blow down each individual hole. Plus, he's short-winded. You know the good part?
I can't imagine.
He got 96 different wishes.
Did any of them come true?
I think 3.
You believe in wishes? I mean, you believe they come true?
Nah, I believe in wishes, but I don't believe they come true. Not unless it's a real easy wish, like, I wish I was at a birthday party. But you gotta blow out all the candles, or else the wish don't come true. If one candle stays lit, you don't get your wish.
Well, suppose you wished one candle would stay lit.
What do you mean?
I mean, suppose you wished that one candle would stay lit, and then you blew them all out. What would happen?
Well, it couldn't happen unless you blew them all out.
But if you blew them all out, then one candle wouldn't have stayed lit, so your wish wouldn't have come true.
Don't give me that college shit, will you? Jesus, Herbie, you ever notice this guy? Soon as you start talking about something intelligent, he has to throw in that college shit. He says, if you wish for one candle to stay lit, it won't happen unless you blow all the candles out. That's the kind of shit they teach in college now.
That's right. Just so happens my major was comparative birthday cakes with a minor in frosting.
It wouldn't surprise me.
You gonna have hats? It ain't a party without hats.
Nah, no hats.
How come?
They come 50 in the box. What am I going to do with 48 extra hats?
In your family, it might work out.
I know. That's why I ain't going to do it. See you next week.
Okay, so long. Have a happy birthday.
I'll do my best.
One Christmas when I was little, my Aunt Lil gave me a book about railroads. It was just the kind of gift I hated, a book. I wanted a toy, preferably a little car or truck, or maybe a few soldiers. I didn't ask much. Just some kind of toy a boy could play with every day and not get tired of. No, a boring fucking book about railroads with pictures of fucking trains. My mother forced me to tell Aunt Lil that I really liked the book. She made me lie and say thank you and all that other drivel shit parents are constantly trying to push into your head. She didn't want to hurt Lil's feelings. Actually, she didn't want to look bad in Lil's eyes. Well, I made the mistake, common in childhood, of listening to my mother and following her advice. I thanked Lil. Guess the result. Right. Every Christmas and every birthday from then on, I got a fucking boring book from my fucking boring Aunt fucking boring Lil. First buses, then airplanes, then trucks, then cars, and on through the years until she ran out of conveyances and had to switch to buildings. I weep when I think of all the soldiers I could have had, probably a battalion or two. Ah, well, I realize the problem now. I was too young to have learned the following sentence. Hey, Lil, take your fucking railroad book and stick it up your ass and get me some goddamn soldiers. That would have nipped the whole thing in the bud. Does anybody really listen to that shitty music they play on the radio, FM radio music? What's it called? Adult contemporary? Classic rock? Urban rhythm and blues? You know what the official business name for that shit is? Corporate standardized programming. Just what an art form needs. Corporate standardized programming. Derived from scientific surveys conducted by soulless businessmen. Here's how bad it is. One nationwide chain that owns over 1,000 radio stations conducts weekly telephone polls asking listeners their opinions on 25 to 30 song hooks they play over the phone. Hooks that the radio people have already selected. Hooks are the short, repeated parts of pop songs that people remember easily. Depending on these polls, the radio chain decides which songs to place on their station's playlists. Weeks later, they record the hooks of all the songs they're currently playing on their stations across the country, label them by title and artist, and sell that information to record companies to help create more of the same bad music. They also sell the information to competing radio stations that want to play what the big chain is playing. All of this is done to prevent the possibility of original thinking somehow creeping into the system. Let me tell you something. In the first place, Listening to music someone else has picked out is not my idea of a good time. Second, and more important, the fact that a lot of people in America actually like the music automatically means it sucks, especially since the people who like it have been told in advance by businessmen what it is they're supposed to like. Please save me from people who've been told what to like and then like it. In my opinion, if you're over 6 years of age and you're still getting your music from the radio, something is desperately wrong with you. I can only hope that somehow MP3 players and file sharing will destroy FM radio the way they're destroying record companies. Then, even though the air will probably never be safe to breathe again, maybe it will be safer to listen to. What is the purpose of having a person sign the Star-Spangled Banner? Don't deaf people know the words by now? Besides, signing can't possibly convey the exact personalized musical rendition the singer may be offering. How could a signer ever convey to a deaf person the elaborate note-bending vocal gymnastics that black female singers put the anthem through, especially those last few lines, "O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave," which sometimes can take more than 6 or 7 minutes to complete? Why, I should think a signer would break an arm trying to get that stuff across. Besides, what does the national anthem have to do with sports in the first place? I never understood that. Play ball. During the Middle Ages, it seems as though every castle had a group of trumpet players who stood in a line and played loud, intricate fanfares whenever something important happened. And it occurred to me that occasionally those guys must have needed to practice. You know, fanfare practice, 3 o'clock near the moat. It could be any number of reasons. New guys in the group, new fanfares, the brand new trumpets came in. So I'm wondering, when these guys did hold practice, and they kept playing the fanfares over and over, were the people working around the castle required to constantly keep snapping to attention? Did maybe some of them do it anyway, out of force of habit? Or did everyone pretty much ignore the fanfare since they knew it was really only practice? And if so, at a time like that, when everyone had been lulled into a false sense of security, what if the king decided to walk across the yard to visit his sister in the dungeon, and they blew a fanfare for him? Half the people would probably just keep on working. Would that piss him off, or would he understand? And what about coming to attention practice? Seems like fanfare practice would be a perfect time to hold it. You know, kill 2 birds. Fuck it. These are the sort of thoughts that hold me back in life.